Right. I want to welcome everybody today to our roundtable on Union Station. My name is Peter Scosi. I'm Executive Vice President here at Metropolitan Planning Council. I want to thank you all for your patience in accommodating our capacity crowd today. Thank you for hanging up your coats. Thanks for scooting in. Thanks for making room for your neighbor next door. And again, we've still got a few folks in the hallway that are going through registration now, and they'll be coming in and grabbing these remaining seats. Clearly a popular topic today. Can everyone hear me okay? It sounds a little muted. Maybe it's a head cold. So Metropolitan Planning Council, for those of you who don't know, we are a regional nonprofit organization. We work on developing policies for a stronger, more sustainable region. We've set for ourselves some 5-year goals that we believe that our policies will help advance for the region over the next 5 years. Some of those goals include attracting 100,000 new residents to live near transit in the region, creating 75,000 new jobs through infrastructure investment, leveraging $24 billion in private investment. That is not to say that Metropolitan Planning Council is going to go out and hire people or build those things, of course not, but rather that the policies that we're promoting and the actions that will result from those will lead to those outcomes. And in fact, we are well on our way after year one to achieving some of those, but you can see from those three I read how today's discussion about redeveloping Union Station as a major piece of infrastructure and creating more opportunities for people to live near that helps advance some of those goals that we've set out for ourselves. This has been a project that I personally have been involved with for at least the last 5 years. I recall getting a phone call in late 2010. Anybody remember Rich Hazlitt from CDOT? Raise your hand if you remember Rich Hazlitt. So Rich gives me a call, lots of people, and he said, how would Metropolitan Planning Council like to participate in a master plan for Union Station and help to lead sort of a civic conversation that parallels a lot of the technical conversations that are taking place. I said, sure, sign us up. Little did I know, 5 years later, we'd still be at it. Though today, you're going to hear from our speakers, and there's some terrific progress being made. And I think that's probably why many of you are in the room, because you are aware of that progress. I don't need to tell you, probably, Union Station is a tremendous transportation asset, moving more people, as many people as Midway Airport. It would be one of the 10th busiest airports in the city, in the nation, if it were an airport. But it's at capacity, and we need to expand some of those some of the passenger capacities at it. It also is a diamond in the rough. Many of you are also familiar with the sort of historic nature of Union Station, and Ray is going to cover some of those attributes in his comments. But we recall, and there were restaurants and shops and barber salons and all sorts of things that brought people to the station and enlivened it as a place. In fact, it is that as a primary motivator that's also driving Metropolitan Planning Council. Not only do we want to see Union Station redeveloped as a great transportation asset, but we also want to see it developed as a great place. It can really lead to the development of the West Loop. It can help to spur greater economic activity, and in and of itself can just be a destination. Folks go to Washington's Union Station, for example, just to have lunch, to meet a friend, not necessarily to catch the train. And we think Chicago's Union Station can offer some of that same benefit to the West Loop. In addition, we've also carved out for ourselves a role of advancing some financing opportunities for Union Station. And one of on your seats in front of you is a legislative fact sheet for Senate Bill 277. It's the Transit Facility Improvement Area. We believe one way to promote financing or the funding of Union Station redevelopment is through a value capture mechanism. This has been a popular tool used for other Union Stations across the country, but we don't specifically have that kind of a tool here in Illinois. We have tax increment financing that's used for a broad range of issues, but not one specifically designed for transportation infrastructure. So we've been promoting and helping to support the passage of this legislation. It passed the Senate last year. It's currently going to go through the House. See how I did that? Going to go through the House this coming year. And I would encourage anybody, if you're interested in supporting that piece of legislation, to reach out to the Speaker's office and express your support for it. After this panel discussion today, I suspect that every single one of you will want to do that. Finally, I want to, before I introduce our speakers, I want to thank our sponsor for today's event. It's Noor Architects, Engineers, and Planners. One of our speakers is Silvio Baldassara, so you'll hear more about him later. But we're also joined in the audience by George Sorich, who's been a great friend of MPC since he's taken over the Chicago office. George, where are you? George, right up here in front. And several of his colleagues are also joining him today. If you're with Noor, just give a little wave. Be nice to those folks. They helped pay for your sandwich. Our first speaker today is Ray Lang. Ray is the president of Chicago Union Station. I, again, have known Ray for the last 5 years, and Ray and I definitely share one thing in common. If you have not taken a tour of Union Station, or if you are taking one this afternoon, you will soon find that that's a building that gets in your blood. Once you sort of see the potential of that, of the facility, and you understand the history, and you see what it could be again in the future, you almost become you become drunk with commitment to making that a reality. And Ray and I share that. Hopefully the rest of you, if you don't already, will become drunk at the end of this. I know I'm stretching that analogy way too far, but at the end of this presentation as well. Ray, why don't you come on up? Oh, I'm sorry. Before you do, Ray, I forgot to mention, as part of our efforts to create and enhance Union Station as a place, we also ran a placemaking contest for Union Station in 2013. I'm not sure if anybody was aware of that. And one of the, so we solicited input from the design community in Chicago. We asked them to come up with their ideas for activating different pieces of Union Station. And one of our winning submissions was Train Yard, submitted by Space Architects and Planners. They turned the Great Hall into a yard in which you could play. And there was miniature golf, there's ring toss, there were some other activities taking place for the family and children throughout the day, and a number of people availed themselves of the train yard during Union Station's activation and placemaking. So I just wanted to share that with you. I forgot to hit advance. Ray, why don't you come on up and share with us your knowledge about Union Station and some of what it was and can be.
Thank you, Peter, for that riveting introduction. I hope you're not all intoxicated at the end of my presentation. I was on the committee that helped judge the winning placemaker, and there was another one. You remember the one I voted for? They were somebody was going to put grand pianos in the colonnade outside under the colonnade on Canal Street with a camera in front of them and watch people play piano all day. I loved that one. I still would love. I'd love to pull that one off.
Somebody donate 10 grand pianos.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's been a wonderful. I think we've known each other more than 5 years, but I really appreciate, all of us at Amtrak really appreciate the work that MPC has done. Really, I don't think we'd be where we are right now without your advocacy over the last several years to make Union Station such a great place. As Peter said, I work for Amtrak. I'm in the Amtrak Government Affairs Department, and where I've been now for 21 years. I'm a resident of the West Loop. I've worked in this building now for 21 years. I walk to work and always have. So this is really, it's not just my place of employment. This is part of my neighborhood. So it is really very near and dear to my heart. Union Station Company, Chicago Union Station Company, Cusco, was created by a handful of railroads more than 90 years ago now. And one by one, those railroads went bankrupt. And lo and behold, Amtrak got the building in 1984. Cusco, the entity, Cusco, which was jointly owned by the freight railroads 90 years ago, still exists. It's a wholly owned Amtrak subsidiary. And yes, in theory, I'm the president. I don't get a salary for that, but I get the title. Usually when somebody slips and falls, the papers come to me. So I get sued. That's all that comes with the role. Union Station is the fourth busiest station in the Amtrak system, about 3.3 million Amtrak passengers a year. But the story is really more than that. Did I see Dave Kralik walk in from there? Dave, yeah. Metro is the primary tenant in Chicago Union Station. Metro runs more than 300 trains a day into and out of Cusco. and they have 110,000 passengers a day on a weekday. So really, the totals for Chicago Union Station annually are north of 30 million passengers a year pass through that building, making it, as Peter said, equivalent in size to Midway Airport. It serves 6 of Metro's 11 routes, as you see. And is really the 3rd busiest train station in the United States of America, 4th in the Amtrak system, but 3rd busiest in the country after New York's Penn Station and Washington, D.C.'s Union Station, the sister station of Chicago Union Station Company. We started on this effort really more than 5 or 6 years ago. We've been talking about and planning a rehab Chicago Union Station for the entire tenure, my entire tenure at Amtrak. But what we have underway now is a really very robust, wonderful planning process that looks at not just commercial development, but also the transportation component of this building. Mark Walburn, who's in the audience here, is the former chief engineer of Cusco, and he's been involved in some of these efforts over the years, and he could certainly talk a lot about that too. As you see, constructed between 1913 and 1925. They stopped during World War I, which explains the length of time it took to build the station. Daniel Burnham building, but completed by Graham, Anderson, Probst, and White. I'll let you in on a secret. We have the original plans in the building, in the offices of the building. Mark, I know you've seen them. Has anybody else seen the plans? They're really cool. Angela's seen them. You can see the handwritten changes on the notes from Graham, Anderson, and Probst. It's really is neat to see those plans. Financed and constructed, as you can see there at the bottom, those are the original founding railroads. There's a window in front of the station on Canal Street that lists those. It's the only place where they're referenced in the building today. The only example in the United States of a double stub end station, basically tracks coming in from the north, tracks coming in from the south, stub end into and out of the building. This is an interesting fun fact. If the entire station facility is largely, it's roughly 10 city blocks, Amtrak, or Cusco, we're the largest landowner in downtown Chicago outside of the city of Chicago itself. Our property line really stretches from along the river from essentially Lake Street, north of Lake Street on the north, all the way down to Chinatown along the Chicago River. It's a huge asset, Chicago Union Station Company. It had a concourse building. This is a lovely picture. I should not overlook this. It really was 2 square city blocks of the station, which was built. That concourse building was knocked down when the Penn Central began to sell off its assets in the late 1960s. Right around the same time they knocked down Penn Station in New York, they knocked down the concourse building here in Chicago, and there's really now a very nondescript, tall white office tower above the tracks now, which has really hindered a lot of what we've wanted to do in the building for the last several decades. Here it is under construction. I love this picture. It's one of my favorite pictures of the station. It must have just been wonderful for them to have been building this building 90 some odd years ago. There it is at completion. Around the Great Hall, most of the space right now is vacant and abandoned, but at one time it was a pretty robust facility with wonderful restaurants. This was the Golden Lion, which is now the home of our Legacy Club, if you've been there recently. There was the Harvey House space, which is really just phenomenal space, which was gutted. This space was gutted in a fire around 1980. Those windows, those there, were bricked over after the fire. The fire really destroyed that space. You can go in there now, and if we do a tour afterwards, Peter and I will show you the space in there, but it was gutted by a fire. It was a real tragic loss. But it's wonderful space now, and any developer or anybody we show this space is really interested in reactivating this space. There it is again. How many of you use Union Station every day? There's quite a few. Okay. As I said, I've been in the building for 21 years, and for most of my period at Amtrak, the Great Hall's been largely empty. We've not utilized the Great Hall for much of anything at all, except for events. And that really didn't start until about 5 or 6 years ago when we started to do events in the Great Hall in a meaningful way. And the reason that we didn't use it and couldn't use it is partially because of the layout, but mostly because of the condition of the building. It never had a modern HVAC system. It was with stimulus dollars in 2010 that we put a chiller on the roof, an air conditioning system on the roof. We were able to install HVAC in the whole building and electric could air condition the Great Hall in the summer. It's a greenhouse in the summer, so it wasn't really inhabitable for us to board passengers from there. It was just not a great usable space. In addition to that, over the last several years, we have installed a modern sprinkler system, a fire and life safety system, in the upper floors of the building, which are abandoned, but we've done that to comply with city code. And we've also done all of the asbestos remediation work in the building. So we put $14 or $15 million worth of work in the building over the last several years, but that has allowed us to populate the Great Hall. We now board most of our trains, most of the Amtrak trains, from the Great Hall. And in fact, within the last several weeks, we've just moved our ticketing function to this kiosk, which is shown here. So we're doing most of our ticketing out of the Great Hall space as well. There it is at Christmas. We're also in the process of moving our Metropolitan Lounge. We have a first-class lounge, you know, like a United Red Carpet Club, which is down trackside, in the space at trackside, which is a very uninviting space, I'll say. And we are moving that Metropolitan Lounge to an area off the Great Hall. We're going to do a bi-level, a 2-floor Metropolitan Lounge with an access off of the Colonnade, which I love here, off of Canal Street. There'll also be an access to the new Metropolitan Club from the Great Hall. We will have rental car counters there too. This is what it will look like on the inside. You'll see that there's going to be a stairwell connecting the upper and lower floors. There'll be natural light coming into that space from the windows off of Canal Street. And you know, we're excited about what that is going to do for the Great Hall itself. It's part of our continuing efforts to really enliven and populate that space. That's one thing that's underway. I'm going to rush through this because I know I'm short on time, but what I want you all to focus on now is what we're doing for the future. We have, with partnership with CDOT, with Metro, and with the RTA, and with Peter, we've embarked on an ambitious Chicago Union Station master plan, which is looking at not only the transportation component of the building, but also the opportunities for commercial development. The master plan itself was a document which was completed in partnership with the city and Metro and the RTA in 2012. Thumbnail cost to do it is about $200 million worth of work. It deals largely with track and platform and pedestrian improvements inside the building. Separate, but moving simultaneously with that, is the master development plan, which is essentially developing the air rights over the head house building today, over the parking garage that we own, and some other air rights on the property. The master plan itself, which Peter and Anthony, who are sitting right here, are the point people at Amtrak on, has 13 or 14 immediate improvements. I want you to look at 11, 12, and 13. In my mind, those are some of the most important improvements coming in phase 1 of the Chicago Union Station master plan. It's a new pedestrian passageway to Ogilvy, linking the two stations, a new pedestrian passageway underground connecting the station to the Blue Line, which doesn't exist, and then, not 13, I meant number 9, yeah, number 9. The new slides are in here. The existing platforms that Metro uses in the facility are just simply not adequate for what we need today. As Peter said, the station is at capacity. I'm going to jump ahead here to these pictures. In the morning, when Metro unloads their trains, or in the evening when they're loading their trains, we don't really have a waiting room in the station for Metro passengers. And in the evening, if there's any sort of a delay to any of the Metro trains going outbound, the area at the bottom of the escalators in the concourse area becomes overflowed very, very quickly and becomes very dangerous. We actually have to park people at the escalators on top, stop them from continuing to go down into the station because there's no trains leaving. So what we're going to do as part of this is not only widen the platforms, but by us moving our ticketing function to the Great Hall, we're going to open up all of that space. This is a Metro train unloading in the morning. This platform here, some of Dave's big trains have about 1,200 people on them. And all those people come in on that platform right there. You see right here is an unused mail and baggage platform, which dates back to the creation of the station. Nobody can use that because you see this ramp right here goes into the basement. It doesn't go into the station. What we would like to do as part of the master plan is what's done here in the bottom here is remove this, move the tracks closer together, and you get to make the existing platforms twice as wide as they are now. So Metra could then unload 2 trains at the same time, which they can't do now. It's found capacity for the building moving forward with the master plan like this. It's really one of the key components of what we're trying to do here. We would also like to see an entrance right up from the platforms right onto Jackson Street. So alleviate some of the stress on the existing space inside the building. So there you have it. This is really now a slide about the master development here. I'm going to move through this really quick, but in addition to the transportation function, there is a development function component to this, which is essentially to put a tower on top of the head house. As I said, I'm a resident of the West Loop. Lived in the West Loop for 20 years. It's really important to me that this building become not just a transportation asset, but really a neighborhood attraction, and becomes like Washington Union Station, where our corporate headquarters is, which is an attraction unto itself. I'll stop right there because I know we're short on time. I know, Silvio, you have, I think, 54 slides. So I'll stop right there and let you get to that. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray. And if anyone's interested in downloading the executive summary or full report, unionstationmp.com will get you access to all of those documents, and you can download PDFs and see a lot of these pictures yourself. Come on over, Silvio. So one of the reasons we've asked Silvio to speak today is not only his 43 years of experience in the business, but one of the projects he's been spending the most of his time on lately is Toronto's Union Station. And I'm just going to read from his bio the 3 main points of Toronto's Union Station redevelopment. Number 1 is to expand the transportation components of it from 65 million to 130 million. So we see a very similar goal with that project as well. Restore and completely renovate the National Historic Beaux-Arts Station building. So that other sense of place and identity. It's also, I believe, a Burnham design building. And then thirdly, create a destination and commercial retail hub. So we've often joked that you could just literally line out Toronto Union Station and write in Chicago Union Station and save them all that money on planning. But we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to learn from Silvio's experience in Toronto just now. Thank you, Silvio.
Thank you, Peter. I just want to touch on something that Peter said a little bit earlier. I spent about 20 years basically leading an aviation group in our office in Toronto. With Peter Dubin, who runs our Chicago office here, we share that love and that passion for transportation and aviation. But I'll go back to Peter's earlier comment that Union Station for me was one of those projects that really, really sticks to you. It really means something, because I've designed airports throughout Canada, and the meaning that I found at Union Station in Toronto, I didn't find that in any of the projects that I've done. So I'm going to go through and share Union Station in Toronto. We started on Union Station in Toronto in 2007, and we have 2 more years to go to complete the project. So these are very long projects. They're tough projects. So I'll take you through. This is Union Station. How many people in the audience have been to Toronto? Everybody, good. So 1927, the station actually opened. There was an original station in Toronto prior to Union Station, but this replaced that smaller building. And as far as Toronto, population of Toronto is 2.8, but if you drop right down to the bottom on that slide, we really deal with 6 million people in the greater Toronto area. And those are the people that we're really dealing with when we talk about transportation at Union Station. There are 4 individual projects that are happening simultaneously. We're involved in 3 of those projects. I'll start at the top, the TTC subway. What's happening there is there is a TTC station that loops and connects directly into Union Station. That had 1 platform. The platform is being doubled. So that project is going on. The head house, similar to your Union Station, was completely restored, and the areas underneath were restored. The viaduct is our project where we're building completely building underneath, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. And then the northwest path connects to our underground system, which actually terminates all into Union Station for the entire city. This is the train shed. The green that you see is green roof, of course. And in the center of that, there is a new atrium that's being built. And this is basically to restore the actual canopy for the actual train tracks. What you can see there, you can see the crane on the left. Let's see if I can. So that crane that you see on the left, that is the new glass roof. This is the underground TTC station platform that's completely dug out. This entire block was completely closed off for about 2 years for that work to happen underground in front of Union Station. And this is the underground path. So if you can imagine, this spreads out through the entire city of Toronto. So you're actually able to, from our office, which is sort of midway up the city, you can connect down underground underneath all of the major towers. Most people park their cars and basically take their coat off, and they go to eat and they go to restaurants and they do a lot of things underground. But you can see how it ties into Union Station itself. So some facts, obviously, the biggest tenant at Union Station is the regional train system, 43 million passengers a year, and that is expected to grow another 20 million in the next 20 years. TTC, this is the subway system in Toronto, 20 million passengers per year, all end up at Union Station. It's that station in particular is the fourth busiest in the TTC system. And then VIA, which is our equivalent to Amtrak, which brings in passengers across Canada, 2.6 million passengers. 50% of all of the VIA passengers use Union Station. And then this is new. This is our new train that connects Pearson International Airport to downtown Toronto, and it lands right at Union Station, right on the tracks at Union Station, and that adds another 2.4 million passengers. So in total, what we're looking at is 70 million passengers using Union Station on a yearly basis. And that happens to be twice as many passengers as Pearson International, which is the largest airport in Canada. So this is truly a transportation hub that we're looking at in Union Station in Toronto. The expectation and the projections are to grow another 20 million in the next 20 years. So we're going to be hitting about 100 million passengers. And part of our design problem is how do you deal with a station that was sized for substantially less than that to try to hit those numbers? So the objectives that we really looked at was, number one, this is a transportation funded project from a government point of view, and I'll go through those numbers a little bit later in the presentation. So it was our number one concern. How do you deal with all of those people that are, and the numbers are growing year by year because we see more people living in the suburbs and actually coming into Toronto to work. Retail food enhancement. We've seen that at airports. We've done that at airports for years, and even at airports, that is a growing trend right now. At Pearson, we're tripling and quadrupling the number of retail concessions that are at Pearson Airport. Most transportation hubs see this as a growing industry, and that's something that we wanted to capitalize, certainly at Union Station. And then when you're dealing with potentially 100 million passengers a year, pedestrian flows are absolutely critical. You really start with that because if the flow's not right, the building simply will not work. And our solution was a dig down, which I will explain, and then I'll touch on the costs that I'm allowed to talk to you about. I can't talk to you about all of the costs. And then I'll do a slight small tour. So this was our solution, and we looked at building above. We looked at, it's a very limited site. The only place we could go was down. So we decided that we were going to do a dig down. Everyone's familiar with Boston and their dig down, and this is Toronto's dig down. It was the only solution where we could deal with the people coming off the trains into a concourse and then meld that with a retail food area that we wanted to look at. So this is what we did. The before is what we had at Union Station. We basically, the red that you see are basically micropiles. We put micropiles down to rock. When the micropiles were down to rock, we stabilized the structure up above, and then we cut the column. Pretty simple to do, not a big deal. And then we extended the column down to rock on a new foundation, and we ended up with what was a real plus. We ended up with a complete new retail level at the lower level, and we ended up with a totally dedicated concourse, which the building did not have originally. This is the plan. Unlike Chicago, our tracks go straight through. They're very, very tight. We have no expansion possibility on the site. We're landlocked to the south, obviously landlocked to the north, the east, and the west. So the tracks are set. There's nothing we could really do to the tracks. There's 12 tracks, and they're all fully utilized. The head house on the left, Metrolinx is our regional bus system, and they're in we renovated the west wing, which is a 4-story structure for basically the major tenant in the entire building. And the blue is commercial office lease. That's the east wing, and the Great Hall sits in between the two wings. So this is the dig down. We dug down underneath the tracks. So we're cutting columns when there are trains flying through. What you're going to see, most people have not seen, because we really didn't want anybody to know what we were doing underneath. We have not shut down operations at the city for one day. It's been fully operational through all of the construction. And there's the Great Hall. So basically 822,000 square feet of existing, and we're adding 114,000 square feet of new. The GO area, which is the regional train system, we're actually adding 100,000 square feet to GO, and that is in 2 separate concourses. So total new for GO is 80,000 square feet. And those are the new concourses we created. Those are the 2 floors that we put in. We separated them because eventually, this is a through system, eventually the trains will back in. And we want to separate the train traffic as it's coming through. And it was a good way to actually split the building and gather the passengers and bring them down to the lower retail areas. The center area is VIA, and it has a sloped floor, much like yours, but that is dedicated to VIA and actually drops down 2 floors. So we weren't able to do anything in that area. But that's the new concourse will take care of all of the passengers coming off of the trains. So then retail. We spent a lot of time taking a look at Grand Central Station in New York. And that's a model that we use. That's a model that we sold to the City of Toronto, who owns the building. And when you take a look at Grand Central Station, they've done wonders with their fresh food market. Where people come in and basically buy prepared foods and meats and things and actually take them home. It's been quite a success. And if you're in the building, you'll see how successful that is even today. I mean, it's been open for a long time and it's working quite well. So this is an idea that we've actually captured and we're using in our Union Station plans. This is the concourse level, and you can see the Great Hall in the middle, and the east wing and the west wing on either side. The salmon color that you see up on the screen was supposed to be salmon. It comes out of a different color up on the screen. But that's the new retail. So that's where we see restaurants potentially going because they're right off of street level. So there will be a number of restaurants that will be promoting in that area. The Great Hall, to the north wall, That's basically going to be an oyster bar, again, similar to Grand Central Station, looking at Grand Central Station in New York. And then this is the new floor that we've created. So this is all brand new, and this is below the concourse. And you can see the amount of retail. The center retail that's labeled, that is the fresh food market. It is right in the middle. And if you take a look at the building, we have access points all the way around the building. So people come in from all sides of this building, and they exit from all sides of the building. So the food market is located right in the center of that. So if they do want to buy fresh food, they have to go in the middle before they go up to their trains. And this is the precedent. This is basically off the internet. These are slides. Grand Central Station, has certainly been very successful with dining and drinking inside of Grand Central Station. These are food facilities that are for travelers at Grand Central Station. Then this is the market at Grand Central Station. You can see what's actually sold in the market. I mean, it is really truly like going into a gourmet, facility and buying your foods to take home. This is the oyster bar. If you've been to Grand Central Station, and from a restaurant point of view, it's very successful. And then Apple certainly knows how to do things well, and this is one way that you can convert your Great Hall. But they've been very successful. Pedestrian flows. So 70 million passengers projected to increase to 90 million passengers. If you take a look at that, Chicago O'Hare is 77 million passengers per year. And as we've heard, Chicago Union Station is 30 million passengers. So, what we were looking at with passenger flows in Toronto at 90 million, because we're not designing the building for 70, we're actually designing it for 90 plus. And this is a firm, this is Arup that did this work, and actually the people that did this work were NOR people at one time, and they're now called Arup in Toronto. But what they do, and it really comes out of airport planning, it's really taking a look at schedules for trains to come in. When do those trains come in? Where are the people going? And each one of the people that you see at the bottom, the autonomous agents, every single one of those is coming off of a train based on a train schedule, and they move through the building in what I'm about to show you to their destinations. So again, you can see the two concourses. The concourse on the right obviously has more people coming off of the trains based on that schedule, and they're all heading to the top. And the top is actually the TTC station, so they're all going to the subway station, or they're going out to the street. On the top right, that connects to our path in downtown Toronto. So they're either going to the actual train station, or they're going straight through. And the dig down. So I'll move to the actual dig down, and I showed you this image a little bit earlier, and this is basically taking a look at the actual dig down itself. This is our first prototype. So when I talked about the micro piles, those 4 columns are underneath the capital of the structure, and they're picking up the capital. And they're screwed into the ground all the way down to rock. So those go in first, and then we do the dig down, and then we cut the column. 289 columns we've cut 190 so far, and have not had an issue with the trains running over top of this entire area. This is what it looks like, and you can see on the left. This is the original column. This is the foundation for the original column that goes all the way down to rock. So that's basically the entire structure. As we developed our excavations for Union Station, we discovered that we didn't actually have to put the micro piles in first. We're actually putting them after. So what we're doing is we're coming all the way down before we actually put the micropiles in to support the structure. So this is basically foundations, and you discover this as you excavate. Our structural engineers, we were the architects and structural, mechanical, electrical in-house for this building. We didn't realize that they just poured it up to ground. I mean, they dug a hole and they basically poured the concrete. So where you would expect to see a pretty nice foundation going down, it just went all over the place. They just poured it up against the ground. But you can see here the new columns that are further beyond. And we cut the columns just above and then exposed the rebar and tied in with the new floor. And the column on the right is the one that has been cut, and they're working on that right now. The one on the left, the extension on the column is completed. It was a bit of when you were down there, it was a bit like Dickens' era. And I should say the contractor excavated all of this using bobcats. They could not get large equipment down into the area, so they would excavate at night, pile it up, and then move it off-site at night, during the night. And what you're looking at here is the new concourse floor being installed. So project costs, about $800 million in total. Construction at 536, third-party work, which was work that was done for GO Transit. So as part of our project, we ended up doing work above the tracks for GO Transit that was added onto the project, about $70 million. The Northwest Path at 100, and soft costs 84. The architect's fees were very, very small in that $84 million. Funding sources, the province, again, this is a transportation project, as I said earlier. The province contributed $223 million. The federal government, 140, Via Rail, 25 million, and there are other stakeholders for around 3. So in total, the external, it was kind of a 50-50, external sources and the City of Toronto funding. As far as number of years, we actually spent 5 years designed to tender. Design and contract admin for us is going to end up at 11 years in total. And then construction stage 1 was 6 years, and stage 2 is going to be 3 years, so about 9 years in total. And then very quickly, I just have some images. This is the moat, TTC on the right, and this is what happens right now. People have to go up these stairs into Union Station, and this is what's going to happen when the project is finished. They'll be able to walk straight into Union Station, and this is part of the dig down. And this is what it'll look like inside with the 2-story atrium, escalators from the concourse down to the atrium. And this is what it looks like today. This area has just been opened a couple of months ago. And then this is the concourse area for the commuters, and this is partially open, and you can see the stairs going up to the track level. And then this is the retail. This is one of the first retail areas that was open, and we've been very consistent with respecting the architecture of the existing building and trying to take cues from the existing building in our retail storefronts. And that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Silvio. So our next 2 speakers are going to tag team. And Jeffrey Shapak, who started developing in Chicago in about 2000 when he came over. 2009 started his own business, Shapak Partners, and now is responsible for over 1 million square feet. Jeff? Something? A little bit more than that. His bio's a little dated, so it goes up by the day. And is doing a lot of work in the Fulton Market area. Chris Bazilian is a co-owner of Bottleneck Management, a restaurant group. And we specifically asked Chris to speak today because one of the facilities that he has opened is in the Tribune Tower. So another Howells and Hood in the Tribune Tower, another facility in a historic space. And so he's going to talk about some of the talk about some of the challenges with opening a restaurant in a facility like that. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff first. He's going to speak. Chris is going to make a few comments after that. Hopefully we'll have plenty of time left for Q&A, so think about your questions, and then when they're done, we'll get to those. So you have the clicker?
Thank you.
Take it away.
Good afternoon. You want me to hold the mic? Good afternoon. I wanted to give a couple of caveats. The first one was I had never been to Union Station until I took a tour of it the other day with Amtrak and Ryan from MPC. I too became drunk on Union Station just visiting it. I'm not a transportation expert. I want to share a lot of my opinions, the first of which should be caveated with, I don't even use public transportation. I drive way too often. I find that it's what I do for a living. I need a car. It's a horrible excuse, but I develop real estate, and I'm constantly in my car driving around looking at real estate. I should buy a bike. I know that's the answer, and maybe after today I will go buy a bike. Being drunk on Union Station caused me to have a follow-up meeting with Ryan and Chris last week after I toured the station. I then spent the entire weekend drunk on Union Station, thinking of it more as a neighborhood. I was most blown away by the amount of density that already exists today. To me, density is the key to so many things in a neighborhood. I think we've learned a lot by breaking Fulton Market out of just calling it the West Loop and actually defining it as an area in Chicago, a neighborhood now known as Fulton Market District. Density was hugely important to us there. Our company and other companies in the development world doing work in Fulton Market, we've proven that we can drag major tenants to that neighborhood, and over the next 48 months deliver amongst ourselves about 3 million square feet of new office. I think that's great for Fulton Market. I think that's great for Union Station. That's just west of Union Station. Some of the, in my brain, I've sort of put together thoughts on short-term, long-term marketing, branding, real estate technology as sort of the key things I wanted to talk about. One thing that's very important is this density. People eat 3 times a day. Chris can speak to that. And people commute twice a day. We've already been told the number of people moving through this building. It's mind-blowing. To be a competitor to the top 10 airports in the United States sitting at Union Station in terms of the number of people, not to mention most have 2 eyes. That's 2 eyeballs on each and every one of those people. So that density is incredible. I think in the short term, before a plan is put in place, and I know, Peter, you mentioned you're 5 years in. Silvio just mentioned his entire life has been in Toronto's Union Station. These projects take a long time. In the short term, I think there are a number of things that can be talked about that Amtrak and Metro and Union Station can do to drive revenue and make everyone much more aware of Union Station, especially those like me who don't use that building every day. To get us to come down there. I'm going to throw out a couple of ideas. I know I will offend with a few of these. The first one is the London car tax. Whenever I bring that up, I think I offend a lot of people as to why the city of Chicago would charge a tax to drive your car into the city. I'm a huge proponent of this. I think it makes perfect sense. I think we should be taxed to get off on our exits off of 9094. For those in the United States who disagree with us, let's look at New York City. They have tunnels and bridges. They tax you every time you enter Manhattan in a car. It's a great way to raise revenue to go directly to Metro and Union Station and Amtrak and fix a lot of what we have wrong in our railroads. I learned a ton asking questions with Peter from Amtrak the other day to understand why trains move the way they do. These are things I never understood, and I'm now learning about and asking these questions. Well, one way to raise money would be in a tax. I don't mean you get off 9094 at Ohio exit and you pay $20. That's not what I'm saying. In fact, I think we have some people from CDOT here. My idea is it's a great way to do traffic management flow. If I can get off at Ohio at 50 cents all the time and it's tracked by an iPass type device, and we have too much traffic on Ohio feeder ramp, well, make it $1 at that time of day and move me to Division or move me further south to Roosevelt Road because it's another way for me to get into the city. That leads to a whole last parking conversation I'd love to have at some point. The next one was the CTA buses as a great connecting point. So my biggest struggle that when I walked through Union Station and through the head house building, the Great Hall, was I was disappointed by how few of people were in that building. And then when I went down to the concourse, and I was there at 3:45 to 4:15, how packed that area was. And I lived in New York in the 90s. I experienced their Grand Central Station and Penn Station. I didn't have a car in New York, so I took public transportation often. In fact, I always found it strange when I talk to Chicagoans and I say, you can get to Fulton Market by changing at Clark and Lake and taking the Green Line. And they look at me like I'm crazy. Why would you change trains? And I thought, well, I did that my whole life in New York. I took 3 trains to get to my office. It was a totally normal thing in New York. I think that for us to bring people into the Great Hall before any changes are made to the Great Hall would be, there needs to be a reason to go through the Great Hall. One of the reasons would be, what if we took on the Clinton side and worked with CDOT and CTA and did direct bus connects out of that side? Treat it like you're getting, you arrive in Vegas for a convention at McCarran Airport and the line systems are just down to a science getting you into a cab. What if we had that for buses? And Metra and CTA spoke to each other such that when they know trains are coming in, I'm not saying that they do or don't. Maybe they already do. I'm naive to all of this. But I'm thinking that I live in Western Springs, and I take an Amtrak train in every day, and when I arrive at the station, my train arrives, CTA knows that my train's arriving, so 3 different buses are waiting to unload a lot of those people who aren't gonna walk into the loop, but there are 50 people who would love to be at the merchandise mart. Well, what would they be willing to pay for? How about a direct bus that goes directly to the merchandise mart, and another bus that takes you right into Fulton Market District, or another bus that takes you to the Aon Center? Those would be huge conveniences for people to have coming in off of these trains, and to force them to walk through Great Hall and use Clinton as an example. I'll speed up because I know I've limited time and I've got pages to talk about. The next one, which I was really excited to read about in the press over the weekend, was similar to the Heathrow Express train from Paddington to Heathrow, is the Union Pearson that we learned about moments ago in Toronto. I know it's been talked about. I know it was actually built at Block 37 and unused. I know that the mayor talked about it in the press over the weekend. Maybe it starts in the West Loop. Maybe it starts in River North. How about it start somewhere at Union Station? I think that would be an amazing addition to get people who aren't using Metro and Amtrak to use Union Station. The CTA, we learned moments ago that CTA connection to Ogilvie to the Blue Line, that was on my list. That would be incredible. And then lastly would be technology for short term. Since I don't ride Metro and Amtrak, I don't know how sophisticated their apps are, but I'd be willing to bet that most of the 30 million people who walk through the building have smartphones and have access to apps, and making sure that those apps are using the latest technology. And a great example of that would be, I'll use Eastman Egg as an example. That's a restaurant concept. They actually now have an app that you can, similar to Starbucks' app, where you can place the order and it's waiting for you when you get there. So how about and it's all based on geofencing. So you place the order while you're on the Metro coming in from Western Springs. As your train gets closer, your phone knows to send the order. As you start walking through the Great Hall, and you get closer to Eastman Egg or other restaurant, you don't wait in line. You just grab your order and keep walking. Maybe you get on that Direct Connect bus outside. Maybe you get in an Uber line or a taxi line. I had mentioned density earlier. That density, and I'm using Clinton only because I think that Clinton is the logical side to do this on, that CTA bus, the Uber, the taxi, we have to remember that it's incredibly hot in the summertime and incredibly cold in the wintertime. So as we think through how you can queue all of those people to extend their transportation needs, is figuring out how do we keep them warm outside with heaters in the wintertime, and a very well thought out, organized plan like you see at airports to line people up and get them on the buses. The one thing that they want to do is they're like ants. We saw in your slide how quickly they're moving around. One thing that I think always will hurt the Great Hall, and I don't think we should stop it. I'm not advocating that on, I believe it's Adams, to shut down the entrance points on Adams. But a majority of where the density comes from today is from the loop. They're crossing the bridges and they immediately go down. What do they skip? The Great Hall. And I'm sorry I'm spending so much time in the Great Hall, but that's what I was most fascinated with from a real estate perspective when we toured it the other day. most people I felt were skipping the Great Hall. And we need a way to bring them into it and use it. And Clinton would be the logical way to bring them across, because I was told there's no way to get to the trains from inside the Great Hall building. I went as far as, again, here's some of my offensive comments. Do you stop taxi and Uber drop-offs on those bridges? I saw recently CDOT cleaned all of that up in terms of transportation, but do we stop the ability for you to get in and out of a cab or an Uber or a bus right there and instead force you to the Great Hall? Short term, and I'm about to get to long term, more real estate related things. Short term would be attractions. How do you develop attractions in that Great Hall? I know events was a big thing for a long time. I would say that one option would be is getting together with Dose Market and having a market. That's something that would be incredible for the neighborhood and greater Chicago as a city, as well as any visitor to Chicago, suburbanite, who wants to come in on the train and go to a Dose Market. Another example is taking advantage of those eyeballs. Why we don't have Union Station partner with someone like Samsung. Maybe they're already doing this. Again, I've only been to Union Station once, and I hope to be back more often. Samsung would do something like this inside of Union Station. As crazy as that looks, to think that you'd build a basketball court in Union Station, I don't see why we wouldn't want to do something like that. The idea of Dose Market, Green City Market, the Samsung idea, or other brands. Navy Pier does a Winter Wonderfest. It draws, I don't know the stats, but a massive number of people. I go with my wife and kids, and the lines are crazy to be able to get inside. There's no reason with the amount of space inside of this building that things like this aren't thought of in the short term, not just for Chicagoans downtown, but anyone who wants to come into the city, hopefully ride the train, the Metro train, and come down here and see it themselves. Long term, let's talk about office density. Office density, more than anything else, is the long-term solution, in my opinion, to Union Station. It can't just be people like the ants in that video that come and go. It's got to be people that stay. We were taken by Peter from Amtrak upstairs to see a lot of vacant office space. I'm told there's also a significant amount of additional space that can be built. In the short term, the office space that exists needs to be leased and leased to the right tenants. I want to proffer the following example. Most of you in this room know what the Merchandise Mart is. The Merchandise Mart, as of a few years ago for Vornado, the company that owns it, was a complete failure. And they actually debated selling the building and kind of folding up shop and walking away from it. The Merchandise Mart is far from a failure at this point. It's been completely repositioned. Cushwake was the broker that was involved in it, and it became a major tech hub office on the upper floors. That actually started with something that our mayor and our governor was behind called 1871, which has grown and led to Motorola making a major play coming in from the suburbs and taking space in that office. And how great would it be to have a direct connect from this station directly to the Merchandise Mart for any suburbanite coming in on these trains to easily get into River North to the Merchandise Mart, as an example. The increase in rent in 2 years between 2012 and 2014 at the Merchandise Mart was a 50% increase in rent between those 2 years. Branding and naming rights. One of the first things that went off in my head over the weekend is, why is it still called Union Station? I'm not saying it shouldn't have the words Union Station, but how is there not a major brand? We look at Ogilvy, that's a brand. We look at United Center, that's a brand. Why haven't we gone the route of selling the naming rights to a station like this with 120,000 passengers? I believe it was a day, 30 million a year and growing. I mean, the Blackhawks and Bulls game, I can only dream of looking at Jerry Reinsdorf's P&L on what he's getting in advertising for only his 22,600 people per game. So that's a huge opportunity. And again, being that we're ranked as Union Station, if we were an airport, the 10th busiest, one idea is to create a club environment. Something that has been a great success for our company was doing deals with WeWork, which is a creative collaborative shared office concept, and Soho House, both in Fulton Market District. Both have a club component. It's membership oriented. I'm not saying it has to be expensive. Neither of those two concepts are expensive. But if we have this much ridership already and it's growing, why aren't we creating a club environment? And I know there is some, and there was the Amtrak overnight. So my comments are not that none of this is in the works or is there. I'm just saying these are kind of big things that should be focused on to create revenue. Because if I could pay more to belong to something that I can go to and have a drink there or eat there before or after a train, that revenue is permanent revenue. That's constant revenue. A lot of people laugh at a business like Costco because they don't understand it. Costco makes money off their membership. That's why they're able to offer you those rates. They make billions because you pay a membership fee every year. So membership here would make sense to me for use before and after the train. Now I want to move to food and beverage. I actually, if it was me, and this is going to sound really crazy, maybe the most offensive so far, is the food and beverage in the concourse. If it was me and my decision, I'd scrap all of it. I'd eliminate every bit of it. I'll wrap up. I'd scrap all of it. I would eliminate it all, and I'd move it all towards the Great Hall. I'd move it all to the Great Hall to cause people to go and experience and use the Great Hall, and I'll use an example of that, which is the Ferry Building in San Francisco. This is what it once looked like. I'm sorry I don't have better images. This is what it looks like today. All of that food and beverage down in the concourse is making it such that we can't move around down there. Community, things we can learn from WeWork is a great example, is community. Creating a space for Wi-Fi to do work, to eat and drink, and be around people where you're not always just rushing to get to the train, I think would be a good thing. I already talked about technology, so I'll skip that, and I'll stay on food and beverage and turn it over to Chris. Having one tenant, Chris and I talked a lot about this on Friday, thinking that you could say to Chris, well, we'll give you rent free, just take the space, wouldn't help Chris. It's all the co-tenancy, and it's creating something like Ferry Building that causes people to want to be there. Food and beverage begets food and beverage. Density begets density. And it has to be a very holistic approach, not only in the development of added density of office, but in an incredible plan for food and beverage and retail to be within this head house building, the Great Hall, and free up the space in the concourse. Thank you.
All that from one trip to Union Station. That's pretty good, Jeff.
I was kind of wondering if he breathes. I actually do live in Hinsdale, and I do use the train. So I have some experience, and my experience has been is whenever I get off the train, I go immediately out the little kind of rabbit holes, and I'm out on Adams. I also had never been in the Great Hall, and I take the train all the time until I did the tour most recently. So I think that is one of the challenges here, is try and figure out how do you make it a sense of place. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to just talk about some of the things that a restaurateur would look for. Number one is great co-tenancy. I totally agree with him, is that density begets density. You have to have other restaurants in there. One restaurant group going into one corner will do nothing. In fact, it will probably do more to harm the whole operation than anything else. And what I mean by that is, to me, a master development is the absolute critical component on this, so that when you do have a master plan on what this is going to be, you don't have one long-term lease standing in the way of something really extraordinary. And I do think there could be something extraordinary here. Number two is high pedestrian traffic. It was mentioned earlier that I own a restaurant in the Tribune Tower called Howells and Hood. I also own South Branch, which I think both of those are relevant for this particular conversation. Howells and Hood has massive pedestrian traffic on Michigan Avenue day after day after day after day, all day long. And I looked at it and said, okay, you got a historic landmark building here, but the back portion of it, excuse me, is the printing press building. That was not landmarked, which allowed us to convert office space into a restaurant with a large patio out on Pioneer Court. And that was just what was needed for us to activate that space, given that it was 70 feet off the beaten track. I will tell you, 70 feet doesn't sound like a big deal. 70 feet is the Great Wall of China. And I will tell you, anybody who's been to Howells and Hood in the winter relative to Howells and Hood in the summer, you'll notice a completely different traffic pattern there. South Branch, I think, is a great example in that everybody is coming from that eastern component, and they're stopping at South Branch for lunch or for dinner or for drinks or on the patio and so forth. And the first place they go is that Adams Street escalator down there into the terminal, jump on their train, and they're back to Hinsdale or Naperville or wherever they're going. So staying on the right side of the traffic flow, I think, is really critical. One other thing that we look for is a big open floor plan, one level. Any of you have spent any time in Union Station know that it really is one of these types of deals. Anybody who's ever entered the Great Hall off of Jackson, you go up 10 or 12 steps, you get to a mezzanine to go down 10 or 12 steps. That's a tremendous challenge for a restaurateur when you also have to deal with ADA issues. Not that they can't be solved, but they have to be solved with money, and one restaurant isn't going to solve that kind of ADA type of issue with escalators or elevators and so forth. That needs to be more of a master plan. The great visibility. I want to have visibility. I want everybody to be able to see our restaurant. Any restaurateur wants to see the same thing. That is a really big challenge with the Great Hall, because like those windows that were bricked up in the fire, there's no light anymore. So you've got a really wonderful building, a landmark type of building, but you don't have any natural light. And that's a really critical component for a restaurant group. Constructability. I wouldn't even want to imagine what it would take to actually construct a restaurant without a master plan that involved office space, maybe a hotel or otherwise. I do think that it is possible. I think some of the suggestions you made about a market, similar to if you think about Italy or Latinicity that has went into Block 37, or even the French market that has went into Ogilvy, it sets up very, very nicely for that. And I do think that there's an opportunity to do something like that. Finally, I want to move into the main terminal here. If you think about what's happening around the country and really the world in airports and in shopping malls, they've reinvented themselves. And if you think about your shopping mall, it used to have a food court in the middle, and it had Burger King and Popeyes and KFC and Taco Bell and so forth. And virtually every shopping mall center that is in the first class category now have ripped those out. And what do they replace them with? Great local folks, or great unique concepts that can draw from a much wider audience. Taco Bell is not drawing anybody, okay, unless you show up at 12 to take the party train back to Hinsdale. But the bottom line is you need to have a little bit more of a fresh concept there. And I think one of the things I do completely agree with him in is I would consider taking some of the food out of there and moving it over to the Great Hall, but I wouldn't replace it with McDonald's and Sbarro and Popeyes and Dunkin' Donuts and so forth. I would look at some of the great operators that already exist within our great city and look at a way to build a sense of community. The final part is just, again, the Great Hall. It's a very sterile environment right now. So if you look at what is in there for seating right now, it's basically church pews, right? Not that comfortable, right? We've all been to church. We've sat there on those hard benches. It's not a comfortable environment. And when I was over at Soho House, I met with Jeffrey and we talked about today. And I looked at the drawing room, and I looked at all these people kind of relaxing and lounging, and they're on their iPads, and they're connected. They've got their chargers out, and they've got Wi-Fi, and they've got their computers out, and they're working on projects, and they're drinking great coffee or great beverage. To me, that is a critical element to get a comfortable, friendly, enlightened place in that Great Hall. And it's easy to spend other people's money. It's not my money, to do that. But it's one thing that I think would make the Great Hall a better attraction and make it more viable for food and beverage or otherwise. So with that, I'll stop.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So great to have some different perspectives on the panel, although I think, Jeff, really you're a latent planner and you just don't know it, right? So maybe you fit into the panel as well. But thank you guys very much for those remarks. Questions. What we're going to do, just raise your hand. And I'm going to call on you. Please state a question succinctly. I'm going to have to repeat it so we can record it for our folks viewing online. And then we'll turn it over to the panel. So, Ward, your hand's up first. What do you got?
Yes, are there any plans for the upper levels of Union Station, which were the past offices? And, traditionally, in the past, Union Station also had the Fred Harvey restaurant chain. It was really, really successful. And it was a whole idea, and with the chain demise, it all vanished. I mean, aren't there some things we can learn
Great.
from the past? What's
So,
the program for the upper level?
question one, what's going on in the upper levels where the offices were and the Harvey, Fred Harvey restaurant chain? How come we haven't brought that back yet, Ray? Come on.
The Harvey houses. Yeah, the Harvey houses are really, I kind of have an affinity for them. I've traveled around the country and looked at the abandoned ones. But I'll deal with the office space first. As I said in my presentations, and I apologize I didn't cover all of the things I should have in my brief remarks, but it's an 8-story building. Most of it is abandoned. We have occupied half of the second floor and half of the third floor. When we put the chiller on the roof and we installed the modern HVAC system and the fire and life safety system, we were then able to occupy that space. The rest of it is vacant. We've done all the asbestos remediation. We've sprinkled it and made it available, I guess, for a developer. What we're going to do, though, is with the commercial development process, seek a master developer to not only rebuild the vacant space, but put a tower on top. The building was built to be a 20 or 30-story tower. The footings are in place to support a tower on top. It just was never finished. So we have we did an RFI, a request for information from developers. Some of you in this room, I think, were at the RFI meeting. In October, we issued that. We received a dozen responses to the RFI. That is going to lead us to an RFQ, a request for qualifications, at some point in March from the development community, which will then lead to a full-fledged RFP. This summer, August-ish, I think, Peter, hopefully complete that process for an RFP at this time next year and be in negotiations with a developer to not only build out the existing space, but put a tower on top, and also look at the other Amtrak air rights parcels that we have as part of Cusco, which includes the parking garage, the air rights over the Union Station Transit facility, which is under construction, and also over the tracks. In terms of our Harvey House, I'd love to have our Harvey House back. We have great hopes, desires, and dreams for that vacant space around the Great Hall. We will look to really the master developer to help us develop that space and attract tenants.
Thank you for that. Other questions? All the way in the back, John. Nice and loud.
Hi, in the current plan, the 14 projects, is there any intention to get the cross-through or pass-through traffic, train traffic working, so there can be a express connection to O'Hare?
So
Well, first of all, it doesn't connect. Oh, go ahead.
repeat the question. Go ahead, Ray.
He said, essentially, does the phase 1 of the Union Station master plan envision more through tracks, connecting the southern tracks to the northern tracks? No, that's not in phase 1 of the Chicago Union Station master plan. There's not currently a direct connection to O'Hare as exists today. What we're hopeful for in phase 1 is the connection of the existing pedway, which links the station to the garage. We're hopeful that that will be extended south to connect to the Clinton Street entrance to the Blue Line and essentially bring us a connection to O'Hare, at least through the CTA.
Terrific. Yes. Bill.
When the head house was essentially demolished, the building was structured so that it was very Warren-like and you just simply were supposed to pass through. I think you said you were trying to open that up. That would be really helpful in terms of flow of traffic, I would think.
Yeah, the question was related to what happened to the building when the old concourse building was demolished and the white tower, which we refer to as 222 South Canal, was constructed. That building really limits us. It really does, in a bad way. And I don't know any planner, especially any planner in this room, that would allow that to happen again today. We have taken the space down there, and we've used it for ticketing, for baggage, for customer service, for our waiting room, for our first-class lounge. We're moving as much of that function as we can into the area off and around the Great Hall. Again, partially to enliven the Great Hall, and partially to open up that space so that it can be safer and more wide open, cleaner, more vibrant, airy, bring more natural light down in.
Thank you. Yes, please.
We rehab, we renovate, we attract all this attention, we feed and drink them. What are we going to do with all this stuff? Are there any plans for an industrial waste energy solution that can then be put back into the facility and then also sold back to the grid?
So what are the plans for the industrial waste energy solution, Ray?
I'm
And
gonna
Silvio, how have you addressed that in Toronto?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I'll be very honest with you. Renovating historical buildings where the wall needs to breathe is extremely difficult. You can't go into these buildings and put vapor barriers in. You just can't. You can't. You have to allow the building to do what it's been doing for 100 years, because if you don't, the whole building will fall apart. So at Union Station, what we have done, we've done all the typical things that you normally do with washrooms and all of the the building services that you have. The green roof on the train shed has gone in, and that's a plus. And then photovoltaics on the roof of Union Station itself. When we actually planned the photovoltaics on the roof of Union Station, for the building itself, we're only using about 10%. The rest of it, we really did try to work with the city to sell that energy, and that didn't work out. So we're basically taking care of the building, and basically we're on steam in the building, and that's coming from a central plant, a city's central plant. So we're tapping into that and using that. But getting back to buildings and how you deal with historical buildings like this, people have tried it, and buildings have collapsed because you cannot touch that exterior wall. You really need to restore it back to its original state. And now it's over to you.
I was going to defer to Peter Garapi, who's here from Amtrak, who's working on the master plan, but we do have a component for developers, I believe, to handle the energy issues and the waste and recycling issues. Correct, Peter?
Yes, so as my name is Peter Garapi, as Ray mentioned, I'm with Amtrak and work on the master plan. As he mentioned, part of the RFI, it's a pretty broad process and becomes more specific through RFQ and RFP later on this year. So yes, Ray, that would be one of the components.
Green energy, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Other questions? All the way in the back, Sharon.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could speak to sort of the multimodal aspect. I know there's been some discussion already about, connecting to the blue line, but in terms of the importance of increasing pedestrians and activity. So, and there were these ideas brought up about shuttles to specific locations. So just if you could talk in general about plans for buses, shuttles, bikes, Uber, taxi, the whole gamut.
So the multimodal nature of your planning, Ray, how are you dealing with all the trains, bikes, other modes, Ubers and such, and what accommodations are you making?
Sure. That's an excellent question. And again, another thing that I really didn't cover in my remarks, but if you've been to the station recently within the last few weeks and you look immediately south of the building on Jackson Street, you'll notice, is Jeff? There's Jeff. That Jeff and Luann are spearheading the Chicago Union Station Transit Center project, which is underway. There was a vacant parking lot south of the station that is being turned into a bus terminal with a direct link to the station underground. There will be stairs and escalator and elevator, which goes directly from the new bus transit facility they're building into the existing pedestrian tunnel, directly into the station, so passengers can get off CTA buses and not have to cross the street. A huge improvement for the station. It's convoluted now, how buses serve Union Station. It really is. They come to each different corner. This will take all of the CTA, or most of the CTA buses, and put them into the Union Station Transit Center. There are a number of shuttles, as people who've used the building are familiar with. There are a number of shuttles that the office towers, the major office towers in the city, run to and from both Ogilvy and Union Station every day. This will help alleviate some of the congestion caused by the shuttle buses too, when they open the transit center. So it will have soon, I think August is the working date, Jeff. Soon it will have a full modern bus transit facility connected to the station. We're really hopeful long-term for the connection to the Blue Line. A tunnel connecting, the CTA subway system to the station is wonderful for both Amtrak and Metra. And we're also very hopeful for a pedway underground from the station now to Ogilvy, so that both of the major train stations are connected by a pedway. That will really make it a fully multimodal facility.
Jeff, really quickly, you do a lot of development in Fulton. How important are those alternative modes to the success of your projects?
I think huge. I'm sorry. I think for the
Keep going.
I think for the office, density that we and others are creating Fulton Market, I think the multimodal is incredibly important. Right now, you'll see, similar to River North, Fulton Market has privately run vans that are transporting people, and we're going to need more than just that to move people around, to Ogilvy and to Union Station.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay, we have time for one more quick one. I promised him up front. Jim.
I guess this question is for Mr. Baldessera as much as anybody else. From a design architecture standpoint, as well as to the extent you can comment on it from a commercial development standpoint, what surprised you? You mentioned in your remarks that you got more out of this project, the Union Station project in Detroit, than you did in any of the airport projects you worked on. Besides that, what has surprised you the most about this long process, this lengthy project that you've been working on, and what lessons have you learned from that, and how can they relate to what we're trying to do here in Chicago?
So in 30 seconds or less, Silvio, describe
30
your
seconds?
life's passion.
That's a broad question.
It's easy to do a greenfield site. Anybody in this room who's an architect or engineer or planner, those are easy projects. It's this and in this building, I just walked through it this morning. It's a fantastic facility, but it goes up, it goes down, it goes all over the place. There's no connections through the building. If you can actually figure out how to make this work for not only transportation, but retail enhancements, which are absolutely crucial. Union Station in Toronto would not have happened if we didn't have the revenue, and we have no food on the concourse level. We draw everybody down into that lower level, so we capture them as they go by and as they go home. That made that project viable. They're interesting because they're heritage buildings. In the end, you stand back from them and you say, what have you really created? What you've really created is you've solved a problem that's far more difficult to solve than any other simple building. The greenfield buildings are easy to do. And I think the key with this one is probably the financing. We spent a lot of time on our project with financing, who's going to bring in the money and where's the money coming from. The retail side of it made a huge difference. The commercial leases that we have for the head house, both of them, there's a lot of money coming in from those head houses because it's right at the center of the city. I mean, it's better space than any of the office towers that are in downtown Toronto. So I think it's the mix of all of those things and getting it all right. I can tell you our concept happened in about 4 months, and then it took about 4 years to actually see it get approved at the City of Toronto.
Sorry, that's all the questions we have time for today, Kevin. Sorry. Before you leave, though, I want to turn the microphone over to Metropolitan Planning Council's President, Mary Sue Barrett, and also offer my thanks to everyone, all of you, for joining us today. But before you go, one last comment.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank everyone for helping fill the room. In fact, those of us on staff couldn't even fit in the room. We were in the overflow area listening to you. This is a conversation that clearly Chicago has been dying to have for a while. It has so much potential, this anchor, this asset, and we are a city that thinks big, a region that understands our connections, and we need your help to move these ideas forward. You heard a lot of big picture ideas today, so thanks to Chris and Jeff, Silvio, and of course, if we didn't have you here, Ray, we would not be able to move this agenda forward. Your partnership with CDOT, your partnership with all of the other agencies that are making this happen, there's been a steady slug of funds getting behind this master plan, and now we need more people to talk about the big potential. It's not enough to just improve one VIP lounge and move one track. The whole package needs to move forward, and at a time when the budget crisis is top of mind for everyone, sometimes it's difficult for us to think big. But this city and this region has not been growing. This is one of the infrastructure assets that we need to invest in for it to happen. So Peter Scozzi talked about the Transportation Facility Improvement Act that needs your help in Springfield to make it through the House. And to stay connected to MPC, we hope if you didn't already, if you are not already receiving our information, you'll drop a business card before you leave in the fishbowl outside. And do join us for one of our upcoming events. In the coming month, We have 2 after-work events. We call them our Urban Think and Drinks, one on March 3rd with former U.S. DOT Secretary Ray LaHood, who has just written a book called Seeking Bipartisanship, so I think we all need to hear that lesson. And then the woman who brought pedestrians back to Times Square, the former Bloomberg New York DOT Commissioner, Jeanette Sadekhan, also has a new book out. So we are tapping both of them, and we hope to invite many of you with colleagues back here for an after-work 5 p.m. event. So you can register for those online at metroplanning.org. Thanks again to George and your whole team at NOR for joining us today, for bringing us Silvio, and for helping us get the word out. So thank you. I hope you have a chance to meet some additional colleagues here, because some really fascinating people here in the room today. Thank you.